Give yourselves a round of applause for being here in Destin, Florida for our town hall meeting at the Leadership 500 Summit. My name is Nicholas Wiggins. I am Manager of External Relations for the National Board of Directors of the NAACP, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the Leadership 500 Summit and our town hall meeting entitled Protecting Our BMWs. And what does that stand for? It stands for Black Men Walking. And so, in a moment, we will introduce and have our panelists actually come up and introduce themselves, but a few housekeeping notes. Again, I'd like to welcome those of you who are with us on the World Wide Web through reaching us at www.l500.org, where we are streaming this live. If you have questions, we are accepting questions via our Twitter account at Leadership500, and we will be forwarding those questions to our moderator for this morning's program, who will then ask those questions to our panelists. So is everyone excited for a very, very, very good dialogue this morning? Say yes. Okay, without further ado, I'd like to bring forward Sharnika Hayes, who's a member of the Alfred Street Baptist Church in Alexandria, Virginia, for a dramatic presentation before we bring out our panelists. Sharnika?
Good afternoon. Is it still morning? Well, good morning. I'm so honored to be able to share my voice with you here today. I'm grateful, first of all, to the NAACP, Ben Jealous, Dr. Brock. I'm very grateful to have my voice be heard as far as Trayvon Martin is concerned. I know all of us remember how we felt as we started to hear on the news what was going on in Sanford, Florida. And even in sitting in the back just now, I'm overwhelmed with emotion when it comes to this topic. So what I do when I'm overwhelmed with emotion is I take out my pen and I start to write. And this is the piece that I wrote as a result of what I was feeling when I went through and began to experience the Trayvon Martin situation. This piece is entitled, "This is My America." You have no duty to retreat when your home is attacked. In fact, you are encouraged to stand your ground and fight back. With weapons concealed or revealed, you have the right to defend what is yours. You have the right to kill. So, today, I exercise my right to do just that. Stand my ground and take my land back. I will open my mouth and boldly fire my arm. And boldly fire my arm of protest. Violently empty the magazine of my soul into the heart of this injustice, to kill our tolerance for hatred and bigotry in defense of all's freedom and liberty. This land is your land. This land is my land, from California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. On February 26, 2012, the music stopped, as did the clock, for Trayvon Benjamin Martin. When a trip to the store cost him a little more than he bargained for, armed with a bag of Skittles and an iced tea, the son of Tracy, Sabrina's baby, was killed point blankly, and his killer went free without questioning. A mother cries, a father mourns. I wonder why this still goes on in my America. Almost 60 years since Emmett Till, and it seems like time is standing still, and I wonder who will be the next one in my America. Though race relations through education have placed our nation in elevation and evaluation of this situation, I must make a proclamation that though we have come so far, we have yet to arrive. We still pay the price with innocent lives, though some still deny, close eyes and be blind, or they run and hide, push us to the side. No, never I. I've come to the realization that emancipation is still a destination. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters, this land was made for you. This land was made for me. Home of the brave, land of the free. Martin Luther King had a dream. And still, this is our reality. This is my America, and my home is under attack. I will not retreat. I will fight back. I will stand my ground and defend my land. Peace I will seek, justice I will demand. I can no longer sit as injustice is tolerated. I can no longer stomach the bigotry and the hatred. We battle not against blood and flesh, but against principles. And deep within this tortured mess lies the spirit of the invincible, and with his spirit, I will not be dismounted. Like a tree by the water, I will stand and be counted. See, I hear a mother's cry, and I hear my father's call saying, stand your ground and fight for us all. So I cannot retreat. I will not back down. I will defend what is right. I will stand my ground. When the earth starts to shake, I will stand my ground. When confronted with hate, I will stand my ground. I will hold to my faith. I will stand my ground with my eyes toward the hills. I will stand my ground, and my knees in the sand. I will stand my ground, peaceful and still. I will stand my ground, holding God's hand. I am Trayvon Martin, and this is my America. Thank you.
Yes, and that is a perfect opening to our town hall meeting this morning. Without further ado or delay, I'd like to bring forward your panelists this morning for our town hall meeting, Protecting Our BMWs. Let's welcome Mr. Scott Esdale, President of the Connecticut State Conference of NAACP and member of our National Board of Directors. Mr. Clee Bone Sloan, actor and activist. Our moderator for this morning's panel, Dr. Michael Eric Dyson. Bishop James Dixon, pastor of the Community of Faith Church in Houston, Texas. Vincent Sutherland, Assistant Counsel, Criminal Justice Practice for the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund. And via Skype, Mr. Marlon Wayans.
Well, we are honored to be here today. I'm certainly grateful to be here in the presence of so many intelligent and insightful people who are concerned about issues of justice. We certainly want to shout out Chairman Brock and President Jealous for their extraordinary diligence in the perpetuation of a legacy of freedom seeking among all people of conscience and those who are concerned about doing the right thing at the right time. This panel, as has been indicated, will address a variety of perspectives when it comes to dealing with the criminal justice system, our interactions with it as people of color, especially African American people, the legal precedents that have been set, that have been deeply entrenched in the history of this country, that the Trayvon Martin situation merely exposes, and then these laws as an extension of that, like the Stand Your Ground law, that have really been at the heart of the onslaught against the rights of people of color. How arbitrary a notion of self-defense is, especially when notions of skepticism or suspicion are introduced. How do you quantify that? How do you empirically verify the degree to which a person is somehow seen as suspicious? And then How is that related to the fact of African American people and other people of color just by showing up evoke that kind of suspicion? You know, I'm always in the airport when they say, if you see anybody suspicious, report them. I'm always afraid somebody gonna report me. And long before 9/11, I was being pulled over in the line from the airport. And I'm like, you know, brothers and sisters, the stuff y'all looking for, that's not what we do. Those are not the crimes that we are more likely to engage. Now, if you were checking brothers for breaking and entering, you'd have a point. But, so the reality is, how do we talk about a legal system that is predicated upon deeply ingrained prejudice and bias to begin with, social mores and beliefs that are deeply entrenched in the subconscious of, the collective unconscious of America when it comes to who's more likely to do a crime or not, and who's seen as skeptical or who's seen as suspicious or not. And then what do we do to talk about our own communities, what we can do to police our own boundaries, the degree to which we capitulate to narratives of violence? Does pop culture feed into that? How do we reproduce the very pathology we're seeking to distance ourselves from? So we want to talk about all of that and then talk about what it means to be young and black and male in an American society, where our lives continue to be not at a high premium, but continue to be the flotsam and jetsam in the stream of America's existence, fueling the dynamic process of progress and capitalism on the one hand, but seen as the continuing symbols of the devastation of America at its worst. How do we reconcile all that stuff? So we have a tremendous panel here, and I want to get right to it. They're going to introduce themselves. Allow me to reintroduce myself. Okay.
My name is Howard.
Okay. We didn't want to go a whole all the way, but we wanted to do that. So I'm going to start to my right and ask the gentlemen to introduce themselves, their areas of expertise, and then I'll ask them a few questions so we can spark and ignite a serious dialogue. Mr. Sutherland.
Sure. My name is Vincent Sutherland. I'm an assistant counsel in the NAACP Legal Defense Fund's Criminal Justice Practice Group. Most of the work that I do revolves around race and criminal justice, which happens to be all of criminal justice. A lot of work I do is post-conviction death penalty work, racial profiling lawsuits, and efforts to eliminate the taint of racial discrimination and bias in the criminal justice system.
My name is James Dixon. In addition to being the pastor of the Community of Faith Church in Houston, Texas, they call me a community activist. I'm an author, and I am the state chair of religious affairs for the state of Texas NAACP. Also the founder of We Power Now, an organization that brings people like us together to talk about solutions. And under that program, we have a program called Be Your Brother's Keeper, Not Your Brother's Killer. And right now we're dealing with racial profiling and issues with the whole prison industrial complex in a major, major way. We got to depopulate the prison plantation. And we'll talk a little bit more about that.
All right, thank you, sir.
My name is Cleve Sloan. I'm from Los Angeles, California, South Central, born and raised. I'm a non-active gang member, blood, and changed my life. I became a filmmaker. I did a film documentary called Bastards of the Party. I got nominated for an Emmy, and it opened the eyes of the state of America, Black America. What my film did, it was the first film to connect the fall of the Black liberation movement with the rise of black gangs. With that void of the Black liberation movement came CRIP, continuous revolution and progress, what we know is a nationwide gang today. So my film, what it did was really even let our people know exactly how we came to be in this point. Gangs didn't just grow overnight. It's a 45-year process that's been able to continue, and that's pretty much who I am.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Scott X. Esdale. Everyone calls me Scott X. That's what everybody knows me as. I am the state president of the Connecticut NAACP, also a national board member representing Region 2. I've been working on Stop the Violence Initiative since 1987. I consider myself a voice on the national board to articulate the issues that are going on in urban areas throughout America in reference to violence and the black-on-black crime that's going on. We talk about the the issues of police brutality, but we also have to talk about the issue of blacks killing each other in our communities also. Right. And I think that that needs to be a major priority of the NAACP to articulate that and put that issue on the national stage. I'd like to thank Sister Rosalind Brock for making this become a reality. Being on stage with Brother Dyson, listening to him with the words like planning, organizing, staff, and directing, coordinating, reporting, budgeting. He's bad, boy. So I'm just really happy to be on the stage and being able to discuss this issue because I think it's very, very important.
All right, and we'll get Brother Wayans to introduce himself by Skype.
Marlon Wayans, Keen and Damon, little brother. Writer, producer, comedian, director, actor, concerned for all the humanitarian, and just here to lend my ears to what's going on.
All right, brother, we appreciate that. Mr. Southern, let me start with you, sir. When the Trayvon Martin situation occurred, and when we began to see the information trickle out, and we began to understand that from what we could tell, this was an unarmed child, 17 years old, returning to his father's fiance's home in a gated community, armed with Skittles and iced tea. The brilliant poem that was read in our hearing reminded us of that. And from there, we saw a lot of things happen. First of all, we saw that the Stand Your Ground law was really the culprit behind all of this, in combination with the vicious racial profiling that had occurred. Even the prosecutor talked about the profiling that occurred with Mr. Martin, but we also saw a lot of brushback as well in terms of posthumous homicide. Getting at his reputation, trying to instigate a kind of racially fueled bias against him as a young man who was, quote, innocent. So can you talk to us about the legal precedents? We've read, the new Jim Crow by Professor Alexander that speaks about the prison industrial complex, but can you enlighten us as to how the Stand Your Ground law operates, why it's especially deleterious to black people, especially young black men, and what kinds of things we need to be thinking about in order to push back against that kind of law?
Sure. So the Stand Your Ground law, what it essentially does is allows for situations like what happened to Trayvon Martin, allows for vigilante justice. An individual who feels that they're threatened by some type of violence or some type of harm has every right to so-called stand your ground and react to that harm with lethal force. What it does in terms of the black community and what it does for people of color in general is that it elevates this level of threat that's felt by Caucasian individuals and other individuals in this sense. Their view, their historical view of race and criminal justice in America has linked race and criminality with young black men and black people in general. Falsely linked those two phenomena, black men and crime. And so when an individual feels threatened, that's a completely subjective judgment about how they feel. And into that subjectivity flows all the historical biases, all the historical racism, all the historical ideas about race and criminality in America. And that allows for an individual who may not be feeling threatened at all, who encountering Trayvon Martin carrying a can of iced tea and a bag of Skittles, to seem like a threat because of that historical baggage that the perpetrator, Mr. Zimmerman in this case, is carrying with him, and act out in very violent ways and vicious ways and indeed murderous ways.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to definitely come back to that because that historical construct has allowed a lot of pain and suffering against African American people and other minorities, and has permitted a legal defense against the kinds of practices, behaviors, the sense of threat, who looks like a threat. We saw the study from Duke University that suggested that white people, for instance, do a lot more drugs than black people. And yet they ain't in jail.
Right.
Because you're not checking out the average white person who might have a stash,
right,
who's getting high. And I don't blame white people. They're probably thinking, hey, that's cool. I don't get, racially profiled. I'm getting higher and higher by the moment. But the point is that had they been targeted, they would have been at least legally liable. So we want to speak about how those two are related. Pastor Dixon, you speak about the police brutality, the prison industrial complex, you also have a concern about, as Brother Scott and others, well, we all do, but in terms of emphasis, about what happens to, quote, black on black crime. So why don't you speak to us about what your perceptions are of the criminal justice system, the prison industrial complex and its relationship to black communities, which on the one hand are victims of almost an occupation state. Absolutely. On the one hand, and then the kind of undeniable narratives of violence that get reproduced in our own community.
Yeah. Let me just say this. The whole issue of the prison industrial complex is amazing. I wrote a book entitled If God Was Good, Why Blacks Doing So Bad? And I talk about the fact that prison is actually a plantation. You've got to understand, of course, as it's been written about by others, billions of dollars a year are generated for-profit American companies by prison labor. And those same prisoners, when they are released from prison on parole or what have you, cannot walk into any one of those companies and fill out an application. So they are good enough to work for them in prison, but of course off limits once they're out. And that whole recidivism process is repeat customers. Every business thrives on repeat customers. And so does the prison industrial complex. It thrives and succeeds and prospers on repeat business. And that repeat business, for the most part, is African American men and other minorities. We have got to have a total reorientation within the African American community to help our young brothers to understand that anything that you do participatorily to put yourself in that predicament, you are actually punking out. Because that is the system designed to enslave you. And so you're not strong because you do that. That's a weakness of ours. We got to really understand that. And we've got to, I think, develop an agenda to depopulate the plantation. There are state by state by state, there ought to be an agenda to depopulate the plantation. We've got to address that very aggressively. I think the other thing that's important for us is this reorientation about be your brother's keeper, not your brother's killer. Yes, I am definitely concerned, and I'll talk about the police brutality matter in a moment, but we are perpetrating so much violence against ourselves. I am sick and tired of doing the funerals of African American young men and young boys. Just a month ago, I did a funeral of a lady who lost her son to black on black gun violence. This was her second son in 3 years dying to black on black gun violence. There was not a white man anywhere near that crime. And so we have got to be honest with ourselves about that pathology as well and deal with that aggressively. It's a reorientation. That's your brother. That's somebody's mother you're putting on that front row. And then finally, let me say, as relates to brutality, we just had a case called the Chad Holly case. Look it up on the internet. 15-year-old kid. He was a burglary suspect. Police chased him, hit him with the police car. He fell to the ground, hands behind his back, then his head, and 4 police beat him. It was caught on tape. All the nation has seen it, and the first officer was exonerated last week in Houston. And so we've been marching and protesting, but we've got all these issues. We've got the Justice Department involved. The reality is, though, we have got to, as a people, also address the whole system. I think that the orientation of police officers is jacked up. So we got to start with the white boys in middle school, elementary school need a reorientation about who black people are. Because their fathers don't understand who we are. And they hate us and fear us unnecessarily. But unless we begin to educate young white boys so that when they become police officers, you don't see me as a threat, you know me as a friend. So that's a whole other paradigm for us to begin to address.
Very good stuff.
I think, I also, to expound on what you're saying, I think that it starts kind of before prison. I think it starts with the public housing. I think it starts in the prisons that we are raised in when we get public assistance. Me being a product of that, growing up in projects of New York City, we are raised literally in a jail. It is a jail. So that's why we're so accustomed to going to jail, because that's where we're directed from the inception, from birth. That's where we go. So if the public is going to assist us and the government is going to assist us, then we have to up our public schools. We have to get better education. We have to align ourselves to be on par with these white kids and be grouped into a society that trains you to do better and to train you differently. You know, it takes, my brother helped to break our cycle. My parents helped to break the cycle, but you are raised in a project. You are raised in a jail. So that mentality is deep-seated inside your mind since you're a child. And so I think that we have to change our system. Like, I send my kids to private school on purpose because I know that gives them a better chance to be on par, a better chance to make it in this life and not have that mentality of, you know, that you're kind of raised in when you're raised in the project. It's a whole nother world.
Okay, absolutely. Brother Bone, let me turn to you, because given what Brother Sutherland spoke about in terms of the kind of legal basis for laws that really don't respect our humanity, and then some of our own practices that really end up recycling some of the same vicious mythologies about black people. Because, you know, I would say in adjunct to Pastor Dixon that white folks' bodies may not be there, but their ideals are there in black on black crime. What more effective way than by ventriloquism to throw your voice, you know, onto a situation? Because acts, I'm not saying every act, but I'm saying the function of black on black crime is that we believe the lie about each other. Right. So we reproduce the pathology and the psychic distortion of self-hatred as a way of allowing white supremacist ideas to creep into our own practices. That's not to exonerate us, but it is to acknowledge that there are systemic problems as well, because look, I'm a professor at a predominantly white school, and I know that white folk ain't superior intellectually to black people. No disrespect, I'm just saying. Having said that, but they are not treated in the same way. So why is it that we're still caught up in a cycle of trying to, quote, prove a humanity that is exaggerated among white brothers and sisters and degraded among African American people? What I want to ask you, you were a former gang member. You were caught up in the very thing that Pastor Dixon and Brother Wayans spoke about, and yet you saw a way out of it. Bastards of the Party is a tremendous documentary that everybody should see. Tell us what you think on the ground, why black people bang, why young black men find that rituals of masculinity are best accessed through gangs, and what we can do to really try to, you know, derail that train of self-destruction.
I think a lot of it, I mean, a big chunk of it is what Brother Wayne said. You know, when we grow up, we're in this culture, and it's a violent culture, and we're 9 and 10, and we see violence, and we see death, and we see I used to kick back and watch the funerals, and I would see guys I admired cry. And I knew these guys, I heard it was bad, but I'm sitting up here crying, so I was like, they can't be all that bad. You know what I mean? So once you're in this culture of violence, and you start coming up, and you really don't have any resources, you really don't have anything, you want to walk, you want respect, you want people to know your name. And unfortunately, so the best way to get your name out there is to retaliate what happened in your community, in your corporation, or whatever.
Right.
So if a kid takes it upon himself to retaliate for this whole group of people, you know, he's praised. And there, in his mind, he's made it. He's made it, and he's ready for, I mean, I remember being in YA, and I had friends saying, you know, I can't wait till we get to the penitentiary. You know what I mean? Couldn't wait to get to the penitentiary. Just based on the culture and really no resources and no hope other than your homeboy, other than your set, other than your immediate love that's right here. So we don't see outside of that bubble. We don't see outside of that bubble. I mean, a gang member is like, he stars in his own movie and everybody else is the extras. And that's kind of how it is. It's kind of like me, I'll see one, he'll see me, and we know we can look at each other and we know what we got to do. And it has nothing to do with the black community, it has nothing to do with it, has to do with this set and that set. And because I am that man in this set, we hang on to that. We wear it with like a badge. We try to do these gang meetings sometimes, and all they turn into is violent testimonies. Oh, I've been shot this time, I've been in the penitentiary this time, and nothing gets done because we wear it on the badge. I mean, we don't want to forget it. We embrace it. You know what I mean? And you know, I consider myself a non-active gang member because if I'm an ex-gang member, I can't reach them. I'm gone. I cut off all my ties. So what I say is, hey, I'm not doing any criminal activity. I don't do anything, but I will give you advice how to get out of your best situation. And so by me staying non-active, I'm able to stay within the set.
Right.
And if I stay within the set, they see what I'm doing, doing films and movies and stuff like that, and they kind of like, okay, well, Bone doing it, we can do it too. And I try to implement that in my neighborhood and in my set. So, the bottom line is, a lot of these kids, when they come up in these projects, they're looking for a way to stand out amongst themselves.
Right.
Not amongst the world, amongst themselves. And we push each other, and we push each other. And like I said, prison is just a given. It's the only thing you're trying to do is not get life. Hopefully I'm only get 10 years.
Wow.
And if you got 10 years, you did good. And that's the mindset of 18-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 19-year-olds, and that's how serious it is.
Right. Well, that's an eye-opening exposition there, man. And the kind of from the inside, narrating it from the inside too, because issues of race, and I want to bring Brother Scott X in, because issues of racial solidarity seem to disappear. Right? There's no such thing as thinking, except when it comes to my clique or my gang or, whatever. Then it's, Latinos versus African American people. But for the most part, black people killing other black people or Latinos killing other Latinos has nothing to do with a sense of racial solidarity or that's my brother, that's my enemy. Because we're contesting certain territory, certain ideas, certain notions of manhood and the like, which is pretty devastating. Although that notion of non-active member versus ex-member, I might have to apply that to the church, though, man. Let me bring, because there's a whole bunch of non-active members ain't tithing. Okay, but you're doing a great thing. You're doing a great thing.
Low blow.
Well,
Keep it blow.
but Brother Scott, so when we think about all the stuff you're hearing here, the legitimate concerns about racial profiling and police brutality. And what's interesting to me is that many white Americans don't understand that black people have conversations all the time about police brutality and about black people's responsibilities, which is why it upsets me a lot when the first thing white folk want to do, or non-black people or non-Latino people want to do when they hear about certain incidents where they are racially tinged, they go, well, what about yourself? We talk about that all the time. It ain't like we don't do that. But we're not ignorant or naive enough to believe that notions of black-on-black homicide are disconnected to broader perceptions of self. Black people watch more TV than anybody else. It stands to reason we might be prejudiced against each other even more, right? Because we imbibe some of that, we internalize some of that unconscious bias. Help us understand your belief about violence, about its relationship to black people, and the things that we can do to at least identify the major culprits of violence in our community systemically and individually, and what we can do to kind of push that stuff back.
I think there's two pieces that we have to evaluate and assess. The first one is that in the early 80s, the factories left the black community. And when the factories left the black community, that's when the gang violence really started to circulate in our communities. Not only that, that's when the crack hit our communities also. And that's when we started seeing a lot of violence in our communities that we'd never seen before. We've always seen violence, but never on this level. And we really started seeing a lot of young men killing one another. The National NAACP in the early 1900s did a study on lynchings in America. And during that particular study, I think from the beginning of the association to the 50s and the 60s, they evaluated and assessed that there was about 2,400 lynchings in America. Don't hold me to the accurate data, but somewhere in that frame, over about 2,400 lynchings in America. Now, if you assessed and evaluated the murders that took place in the urban areas throughout America from the 80s to 2012, those numbers drastically outnumber the 2,400 that was involved in the lynchings in America. But black-on-black crime, black-on-black murder is way more pervasive than the lynchings that happened in America. So I'm asking the NAACP, and I'm so glad that the chairwoman and also President Jealous have started the dialogue and the conversation of bringing forth this campaign as we went against the lynchings that were going on in America. You might have seen the old signs that they used to put out in front of the headquarters. A black man was lynched today. We have that same type of campaign where we study and promote and market what's going on in urban America in the black community and really get this out here so we could really delve into it and put an end to this.
Yeah, and you raise a very interesting point. And of course, the notion of black on black homicide ain't nothing new with this generation. We think about Alvin Passan and Jesse Jackson's book, and Jesse Jackson as a black leader, of course, as one example of somebody who's been speaking about that from the very beginning of his legendary and storied career. And we think about people like Passan and others who have spoken about that. So we know that that's been deeply entrenched in our intellectual response to homicide, and especially black on black homicide. But the point you raise about the shift from manufacturing to service industries, which depleted these cities, these post-industrial urban centers of jobs. Because if you were in the above ground economy and you had a job and you were working a decent job, you could work by your brawn because you didn't have access to high levels of education. Right. So you could have a job in a factory through overtime and stuff to get into the middle class. It was an elevator into the middle class. When those jobs begin to disappear, then there's a shift in not only economic distribution of resource in the family, there's also a shift in power. Younger people.
If I can interrupt,
right.
Also a lot of black men in the streets now, which created more conflict between the police and the black community.
Well, absolutely right. But I want to get this point, then I want y'all to respond. So what happens, though, with the shift in power relations in families, when jobs disappear and crack gangs come into play, then the person who's providing the infamil and the cable happens to be the young person who in the family who's banging because they have access. They may be unemployed, but they're working. Right. So the reality is that if you've got access to that stuff, there's a shift in power. The state has helped, in one sense, shift power relations from older to younger people. The reason I focus on that, because of that shift in the above ground economy and the disappearance of jobs in the post-industrial urban spaces where you have a shift from manufacturing to service industries and the exportation of jobs, that devastates. Globalization at that level ain't good for the hood because it devastates those local communities and intimate relationships. Spaces for social recreation shrink up. Broken families and so on. So I want to ask Brother Sutherland, I know, and Brother Wayne, you jump in after this. I want to ask Brother Sutherland, what you think about when we talk about black on black homicide, black on black crime, and the things we do to each other. But then, given what Scott X said about these larger processes, how do we keep the balance? Because on the one hand, if we simply talk about the systemic and the structural and don't talk about the individual responsibility, we lose sight of what we can do. But an overemphasis on the individual and the black on black homicide misses the degree to which that only reproduces the pathology of a certain hatred of blackness that has become institutionalized in our own communities as well as the broader society.
Right. I think the critical thing is that America as a whole has never really confronted race as an issue. Never really confronted it. Eric Holder talked about this 4 years ago when he was sworn in as Attorney General. Right. Race and criminality have been linked from America's inception. With slavery, when you think about what slavery was, forced bondage of black people, it was a crime to not work. It was a crime to read. It was a crime to leave. That was a criminal. That was a link between race and criminality. After slavery, you have Reconstruction. People making up crimes, arresting people, throwing them in jail, and using them as convicts for leasing, and working, basically taking the plantation and putting it into the jail and taking workers, legalizing a workforce in that respect. And then in the civil rights movement, it's still this link with criminality and racism, where all forms of social and civil disobedience were treated as criminal acts. And so when you have that link between race and criminality that has basically been with us since our inception, right, you have to really change the paradigm, change the frame, and confront that issue. And not only among ourselves as black people, but white people need to confront it too. Because more often than not, they're the ones who don't really see these links between race and criminality. Many of those things are implicit in their biases, so embedded in their thought process that it doesn't even occur to them that this is something that stretches back 400 or 500 years. And so until we can confront that issue on a broad macro level, of course, doing individual work is incredibly important as well. There was a time when our communities were far more organized, far more pointed in terms of addressing some of the pathologies in our own communities, when everyone on the block knew each other and knew what was going on with each family. And I think in a lot of sense, we have ceded control of our own communities to other forces to allow them to police for us and allow them to speak for us and allow them to sideswipe a lot of the work that had been done throughout the civil rights movement. I think those types of things need to be addressed.
Okay.
I also think that, when you talk, once again, I'll point back to the public assistance. I think over the years, we've lost some very important programs, like after-school programs. The funding for that has diminished. Arts programs. See, young black kids need advice. We need something to do because the idle hands is the devil's workshop. And we need to implement those programs back. And instead of giving us public assistance like welfare and all that, black people, it's not that we need that. You know what we need? Put me on equal footing with you in terms of our education. Teach me to fish, and I guarantee you I will be able to fish a whole lot more fish than you can ever. Because that's just what we are as a people. I also feel like I put the responsibility on ourselves, because I think that's the only way we can grow. It's not to always place blame, but it's to accept the blame and go, you know what? We are lacking in one thing, fathers. My dad was there. There's a big difference between everybody in my project and my family in that project that came out successful. We had something nobody else had, a loving father that stayed there, taught us, raised us, was responsible, taught my brother to be a good brother to us, who helped raise us, reached back and brought us along and taught us, and now we teach our next generations. But it starts with one man. And that one man can raise a family that raises a generation, that raises a population. And we need to assume that responsibility, and those are things that we need to do.
And Brother Dixon, although I want to say to Brother Wayans is that, did you see the New York Times front page story about 2 months ago that most of the white folk who were critics of welfare were benefiting from themselves? Right, that's number one. And number two, the safety net of a society is a projection of the tax base that all citizens contribute to. And so that forms of welfare have been called other things: subsidies for private corporations, big governments. Chrysler got a bailout. The notorious AIG got hooked up big time. And we just see this $2 billion, right? So welfare, you're right, but let's apply it to the rest of America in terms of exploiting that, before, as we also look at what the dependency structures are that have been created within African American culture. But thanks for reminding us, and the presence of the father is so critical. Pastor Dixon, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I want to say this is a crucial point, because we're talking about our own responsibility. I think that we've got to go back to understanding that there's a values disconnect. I have a group called Good Gang USA, and a kid a few years ago got killed right under one of my "Thou shalt not kill" Good Gang signs in the hood. And the police called me to the scene. His 19-year-old brother was with him when he got shot. The kid was 17. So I'm counseling the 19-year-old a couple of days later about the whole deal. He could not understand the link between the white man who shot his brother and killed him and the fact that they were selling drugs on the corner. In his mind, they had a legitimate occupation, selling crack on the corner. He could not understand that had something to do with, not to justify or exonerate the murder. The reality is there's a huge values disconnect. The difference between when I grew up and perhaps when you grew up, Mike, I understood right from wrong. That was a goal for me. That was an expectation. That was a standard. And as Wayne has just said, my father gave us a name and dared us not to tarnish it. So it was that kind of value system that helped us to make good decisions. The other piece on the jobs issue with the factories, what do we learn? There are no vocational trades in school anymore. You don't learn a trade. So if a kid is not tracked to go to a 4-year college, he doesn't learn how to air condition, he doesn't learn plumbing, he doesn't learn how to build, he doesn't learn auto mechanics, he doesn't learn machinery, he doesn't learn technology. So the kid comes out of high school with no skills or drops out with no skills. So what is he going to do? All of that's by design, because it's designed to fuel the prison industrial complex and to put a felony on a kid. We're challenging our DA on some stuff like that right now. But here's the point. If I can work for you in prison, what would happen if all of us knew the list of for-profit American-owned companies that are benefiting from the slave work that your cousins, nephews, sons, and grandchildren are performing in prison? Why don't we approach that from that angle to say, wait a minute, how does a felony make you ineligible for a job once you're out of prison if I made this much money for you while you're in prison? Print that list and publish that list. And then finally, the black church has to take on a new role. The black church has become cruise ships rather than battleships. And so because of that,
Another low blow.
no, honestly, this is confession. We are entertaining and not empowering. And cruise ships only profit the person who owns the boat. Battleships empower people who are not even on board. So to go to the projects, because I hold meetings in the projects with Crips and with Bloods. But if we don't take the church to where the battle is, to where the problems are, to address those issues, we're failing our generations. And it ain't real power because you can shout on Sunday. It's real power if you can turn a life around Monday through Saturday. That's where we got to go with this. If the men's ministry in the church goes to the projects where those absent fathers are, and adopts a boy, adopts a young man, teaches him a skill, teaches him a value, holds his hand. That's what ministry is about. But a preacher in a Bentley who won't walk in a project don't deserve it. So we got to get serious about it.
Go ahead, brother. Go ahead.
That's what this is all about.
Go ahead.
Apropos to that, we're going to take a collection. Let's say this, because we're talking about young black men. Let's be honest. Let's extend and let's test the durability of that black church tradition, as the NAACP did recently, when it comes to same sexuality, because a lot of these young black men are gay. So don't just take it to the hood, take it under the hood. All right? I mean, we got to do that too, right? And this is what I'm saying, because all that talk goes out the window if the very thing that Pastor Dixon is speaking about, a sense of justice, an appreciation for those who are degraded, those who are vulnerable, those whose backs are against the wall. We can't preach all of that stuff and then turn around and reproduce a pathology of a dominant society's view of our internal sexuality, right? Because what happens there is that what we end up doing, as I tried to say, is we become sexual rednecks. We become the bigots. We have to apologize to Bull Connor for the refusal to acknowledge the legitimacy of our own kids. So I want to turn to Bone and ask him about popular culture. I want to turn to Bone and ask him about pop culture.
You turning the bones? What's going on here?
I didn't say bun, I said bone. But what's interesting? Don't get me in trouble, Wayans. Don't get me in trouble, man. So what I want to ask you is that one of the things that's out here is the pop culture, the hip hop music. You know, we read Monster's autobiography, and he said, hey, real gangsters are listening to Al Green. They're not listening to Snoop Dogg, which is very interesting about drawing a correlation between hip hop culture and the subsequent violence. Right. Do you think on the ground, you're there, a non-active member, but an agent for social change nonetheless, which is a brilliant paradigm and model that we could adopt. Do you think that hip hop culture helps the issue because it throws a spotlight on some of the tragedies that the society doesn't want to deal with? Or do you think it, also creates some of the problems, or at least extends them?
Yeah, I think that's when they say, hip hop, we're just telling them like it is, and I think that's a cop-out. I think it's a total cop-out because of the state of our people we're in. Right. Like, we got a lot of youngsters. And I'm gonna tell you something. The word nigga is an action word. It's a verb. It's easy to kill a nigga. It's easy, let's go get these niggas. Where them niggas at? It's a venom. And it starts, so in the rap culture, we say it all the time. But all we're doing is pouring gas on the fire. That's all we're really doing. And a lot of rappers disagree with me when I say this. But it's such a venomous word, because I've seen it and I've seen it over and over and over and over and over again. And it's hard for me to take something from a brother. Like, give me that watch, brother. That don't even sound right, right? It's like an oxymoron. Break yourself, brother. You know what I mean? All right? So it doesn't even go together. So I think that language, if we can instill in our kids, just to even get the smallest thing we can do, because I was sitting there thinking, how can we trickle this down? And the smallest thing, man, which is the biggest thing, is our language. And if we can get our kids to get this word out of their mouth, a lot of violence would go down. It wouldn't stop, but it will go down. Because it's an action word, man. I've seen it over and over and over again. I'll just give you a quick story. Unfortunately, I was incarcerated in 2008, and I was in a dorm bigger than this with more youngsters than this, and they wanted me to be the spokesperson, the leader, whatever. And I didn't know what to tell these youngsters, you know what I mean? So I said, man, if y'all want me to lead, first thing we gotta do is quit saying nigga so much in here. Because we fighting each other, we going crazy, whatever, and as soon as the Mexican and the white boys call us nigga, we wanna go to a riot. And I was like, they confused. We just had a riot because the white boys called us niggas, but now we calling each other nigga and we going back and forth. So I said, if y'all want me to be so-called shot caller in the front, let's get this word out of our mouths. And I was scared to death. I've never been scared before. And then I was scared to death to say it. And I prayed before I said, Lord, I want to say this. You know what I mean? I thought they were going to be like, oh, F you, Bone, you old. We don't want to hear that. And they went for it. And then, you know, some of my colleagues were with me and said, yeah, anybody that says the N-word, we're going to beat them up. I was like, no.
Yeah, but they gonna beat those brothers' asses.
Yeah.
Right.
I said, but what we will do 50 push-ups.
All right.
Every time the word is said. And this is a dorm of maybe 800 people. It's a huge dorm. So as soon as we came out that meeting, I didn't know if it worked or not. I just seen one guy go down, he's doing a push-up, and over there they're doing a push-up. And that went on for 2 months. And some people say, youngsters don't want to listen, they don't want to hear that, but they do. They want a ceiling. They want somewhere to stop. Yeah. But we so afraid of them, we don't want to approach them. I don't want to get into it with that youngster, I end up killing that youngster. I'm OG from such and such. And you hear older men say that a lot of times, 50 and up, I don't want to deal with them youngsters, I'd be done hurt one of them, which is true. You know what I mean? But we can't be scared of them. When I was at my worst, the church wouldn't even witness to me. And I'd be like, I'm not worthy of your Jesus. But they not knowing I was already saved because my grandmother kept me in church and stuff like that. Yeah, I was messing up, but I had a little consciousness. But the church are scared of the youngsters. They don't want any conflict. Preachers don't want to be embarrassed. You know what I mean? Like you said. So I say first, if we're going to trickle down to the streets, it's the word. And if the NAACP could do anything, I always look at slogans on banners and just say no to drugs. All that stuff had an effect. And if we had some type of marketing throughout the nation, just with that word.
They had a campaign to bury the N-word.
Yeah, but I don't think it was big enough.
It got resurrected.
It was kind of, but
it came back like Jesus.
I look at hip-hop
You buried it.
it can have a positive effect.
Yeah. We buried it, but you gotta finance it.
Hip-hop is a language. It's a language that kids are listening to. So instead of trying to look at hip-hop as a bad thing, we should look at hip-hop as this is the new language that these kids are listening to. So we need to talk to people that are spreading the word in these messages and give them a little something extra, something to learn. It's like a guy like Tupac, as gangster as he was, he had the potential and the following. He could have been like a Martin Luther King. He could have been a Malcolm X for that generation. And to this day, kids listen to his music and they love what he had to say because it was ignorance mixed with positive, and he understood their voice. And so we just need to make them more aware of what their influence is to these children, and I think they can give them the messages that they need in the voice that the kids need to hear it and interpret it in.
Okay, Brother Scott X, given all of this, and it's a very interesting debate, right? Brilliantly stated here by Bone, and then juxtaposed to what Brother Wans has, I think, insightfully spoken about. Because we know that, first of all, nigga didn't begin with hip hop, right? First time I heard it, it was a pastor talking about his members. No, that's no lie. I mean, and he didn't mean it well, not altogether. It wasn't altogether
I
negative.
blame Richard Pryor.
Oh, you really? It was way before Richard, but Richard did give a kind of sexy sheen.
Yeah.
Because when he said nigga, it was like, nigga, please. You know, it was beautiful. It was aesthetic.
Yeah.
But the point is that slave master, in the slave plantations, a brief genealogy, black people themselves were using the word nigga to distinguish between field versus those who had abdicated within the house. So they talked about nigga themselves as a kind of internal mechanism of change. And given what you've said about the negativity, there were some who argue that there is also a term of social endearment associated with that term. I don't want to get into all of those kind of internal machinations, but some have said that you can also mean it lovingly and beautifully, because if the word nigga is destroyed, if you still treat me like a nigga, but not call me a nigga, which is what Trayvon Martin's situation is about, it's being treated like a degraded human being without having the name attached to it. And many people think, hey, I didn't call you nigger, so I'm not prejudiced. I didn't think about you as a bad person, so therefore I don't have it. We don't deny the legitimacy and the brilliance of your point, and I'd have to be doing a lot of push-ups as well. But what's interesting is to call into question the linguistic practices that facilitate the dehumanization of another person. That's why rape victims call their name. My name is Susan. Exactly. So raping Susan is different than raping a woman. Exactly. So your point has a tremendous viability there. But Scott X, what do you think, sir, about the function of popular culture and the expression? Brother Wayans talked about Tupac, who said, just the other day I got lynched by some crooked cops, and to this day them same cops on the beat getting major pay, but when I get my check they taking tax out, so we paying the cops to knock the blacks out. Now that's a brilliant analysis that's coming from hip hop culture. Is there some good, some value in terms of Trayvon Martin, in terms of social injustice, in terms of police brutality that we can deal with that would say that could be a bridge, as Brother Wayans said, between a younger generation and an older generation?
Well, I'm glad you brought that point up, because I make a living off of hip hop music to some degree, and I've been working with Curtis Blow all the way up to French Montana, who's a pretty prominent artist right now. But I think that we're missing a piece that's extremely important in this, and I think that somewhat we need to understand the story of Bones. Bones is a pretty tough guy, who was a big-time blood, and that hopefully everybody gets the opportunity to see his movie Bastards of the Party. He goes into the history of gangs and how it all starts, and how the Black Panther Party was destroyed, Dr. King and Malcolm X, and so on and so on. But it was the black men that came in and helped him turn his life around. It was Jim Brown, it was Denzel Washington, and it was also Antoine Fuqua. So black men went beyond to reach and grab his hand. I don't know if you've seen his hand. He's actually been shot, and I think God has protected him for a reason, because of the great work that he's doing. But I think that it's extremely important that we understand that beyond the language and all that, there has to be a commitment of black men reaching back and grabbing men and pulling them up. And if anything that the NAACP strives to do in the future, we have to go back into the projects. We have to go back to the block. We have to go back into the corners. We used to do mass voter registration drives, mass membership drives. We have to go back to hitting the streets, rolling up our sleeves, putting the sneakers back on, putting the t-shirts back on, and really hitting. We're going to need it for this campaign anyway. But at the same time, we really got to reach out to our brothers and sisters. And so many of them are in prison now. We talked about the factories, and now all these brothers and sisters in prison, they're coming out now. And we have to be prepared for them to put them back to work and educate them. I think that we need to have a really, really focused campaign on how we deal with our young people and reach into the ones that are unorthodox, that are not traditional, and also bring those individuals like Bones, because this guy's so talented and so gifted. There's so many more Bones out there and sisters out there that we need to have part of this movement.
Let me ask him a question that's given Bones. I know you're going to try. What goes through the mind of a young person at the moment? You talk to us about, I'm a buck up on that gang because they took my territory. What can actually reach them? I mean, what we're talking all this stuff. This is theory. You can give us the practice. What would penetrate the mind of a young person to cause them to be, to reflect on what they're doing and say, I can't do this anymore?
Consistency. And consistency, I mean, I talk guys down, but it takes me 3 years. I talk them down all the time. They get ready to do something, and I kind of like, man, you don't want to do that, man. Let's try this. And I'll dangle something in front of them. If you guys be cool, I got something for y'all in a week. And in a week, I don't know what it is. You know what I mean? But I just stall them. And a lot of movie companies hire me to go into these projects because they want to film these projects. And they won't let them come in. So they hire me to come in and say, hey man, if y'all be cool, if I'll stop the shooting for a while, I can bring some white folks in there and we can get paid for the next month or two. No, seriously, this is how I do it. It's a show called Southland. That's what we do all the time. So I do all the time. That's why you see us in all these places. Yeah, exactly. So we hire, those extras are real gang members. But they'll be cool for 2 or 3 weeks while that film crew is there.
So if white folk will come in consistently and bring money, then they can stop forever. That's one way to deal with it, you know.
Right. But that company could be us.
That company could be us.
That company could be us going in there to those projects. That could be us.
Right.
And they're not getting paid a whole lot of money. They're getting $100 a day, $80 a day. But it's just the mere fact that people are consistently coming to them and saying, hey man, we value your block. We value this atmosphere. Is it cool for us to shoot here and we will pay you also? And it's a consistent thing and they feel the value in that. Like, okay, well we recognize, okay, y'all can do that. And that's kind of like how I do it. You know what I mean? I'll dangle something in front of them and install them for 3 weeks until I can bring something up. But it takes me 2 or 3 years to talk a real killer down.
Wow.
And while I'm talking, he's getting a little older. You know, he's 17, 18, 20. By the time he's 23, he starts to listen a little bit. His second term from jail. I said, well, you know you go back next time, you ain't coming back. And he'll be, okay, Bone, what can I do? So it usually takes 2 or 3 years for me, and I'm in the streets.
Right.
So imagine your NAACP with suits and ties and all this stuff. You go once or twice, forget about it. You got to really get in these kids' life. My family gets mad at me because I'm so in the streets, but I have to be because that's why I call myself a non-active gay member, not an ex. If I'm an ex, they don't want to hear nothing to do. They want to hear from me. Right. Go on, Bone, you ex, you not one of us anymore. So I say I'm just not. I'm alumni. You know. And I stay on the campus, and I keep coming back to the campus. And that's kind of like how I work. And I'm just
you're the principal by now. You're the principal by now. Right. Let's open it. We're going to open it up now to. Yes, sir.
One thing about hip hop.
Right.
And it's true that there are some positive consciousness in hip hop, but the problem is you ain't gonna get no record deal talking positive. The white folks ain't gonna sign you if you coming in talking about black pride. That went out in the 80s with Public Enemy and all that stuff. Right. Now it's all about kill, N-word.
Things are cyclical. Just like in the 80s, they had skinny jeans. Skinny jeans is making a comeback, and I think positive music, people will listen to. It's just they have to.
They'll listen to it, but how do you get it to them? Because they can't get a deal. They will listen to it. They can't get a record deal. Who's gonna sign a positive black rapper? Nobody.
Right.
They don't sign them.
Or wait a minute.
L.A. Reid, a black executive, won't sign them.
But wait a minute, check this out. But check this out. We got Talib Kweli, we got Common. The question is, will we buy? I mean, you're raising some brilliant points. The question is, though, will we support the stuff we say we want to hear? We're mad at the NWAs. We're mad at, well, that's old school. But we're mad at the murder, kill, bling stuff. But we won't then go out and support those talented rappers and artists who are saying something uplifting and positive, like Talib Kweli said, these cats drink champagne, toast death and pain, like slaves on a ship bragging about who got the flyest chain.
Right.
I mean, right? So we need to support them as well.
But you never hear that on the radio.
You won't hear it on the radio.
You won't hear it on the radio.
It's not going to make it the top 40.
The radio.
Right.
You know what I mean?
But Pastor Dixon, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, and I know we got other questions. Again, it goes back to values. People buy what they will listen to. And our issue is we keep empowering those who disempower us rather than empowering those who empowering us. So it's to our own detriment. If there is no market for it, then there's no product. All the kids in our churches listen to all of that and come to church on Sunday. Okay, all right, so now we are still saying, why don't they make the right kind of music, or why don't they promote the right kind of music? Why don't we own our own? I'm still dealing with, in our neighborhoods. Okay, the factory jobs are gone. That's happening. But the corner store is not owned by us. The gas station is not owned by us. In our own neighborhoods, all the stuff there, the people that are making money, it's not us. That's right. So we don't have our own stuff. And so those young brothers and sisters don't respect us, Mike, because they're looking at me with a suit and tie saying, do the right thing, walk right, talk right, but we don't own anything. We got 80,000 plus black churches in America. We don't have but 30 black banks in America. In fact, it's less than that now. We have more black banks in America in 1950 than we do in 2012. With all our gross national product and all that we earn, we don't own anything. So because of that, we cannot bring enough equity to the table to make our own destiny what we declare it should be. We're still dependent on other people. And until we stop, and we got the genius. Those kids selling crack on the corner are businessmen, but they're businessmen with a bad orientation. What we've got to do is begin to harness that and channel that in stuff that we create ourselves. When are we going to have a discussion about our economic empowerment agenda? When are we going to start? I live in Houston, Texas, the energy capital of the world, and all I do with energy is buy it. We have nothing to do with the industry. So I'm saying we're still on the outside having conversations, but we're not talking about the right stuff.
Except for the fact, if we want to be honest, and given what Bone said earlier about the fact that when he was in the street banging, that the church had nothing for him. When we talk about economic development, Jay-Z is worth $500 million. Diddy is worth $400 million. So wait a minute. Oh, maybe we overlooking the model that's being presented to us by young people who didn't depend upon us because they couldn't, and then generated their own. So now we want to control their values, but we never were concerned about their vision. And as a result of that, they've generated capital independent of us and don't feel beholden to the traditions that produced us because we didn't produce them.
And I applaud them.
I'm not saying that's one. I'm not saying that's one way.
I applaud them for that. I'm saying, but just like we have a Jay-Z and a Diddy, we've got a banker who was never developed.
Absolutely.
We've got a technology producer who never. It's not just the music. It's not just the sports.
Absolutely.
We've got to create business people, businessmen and women who are doing mainstream wealth building. Because the truth of the matter is this: entertainment does not control wealth. Scientists control wealth. Economists control wealth. And until we begin to generate those kinds of programs in our community that says, listen, we're going to make successful people out of the kids who are in our pews, in our neighborhoods, and in the projects. And they are absolutely there. Thank you for the model.
Yeah, no doubt. No, that's a great point. And that's why I think Jay-Z now part owner of Brooklyn, basketball team. Diddy, in terms of Chirac and some other stuff, whatever stuff that we may or may not disagree with, quote, morally. But the point is, in terms of business models, I think your point is extremely smart. And we've got to talk about leveraging the kind of influence that we have with these young people so that the models they've created can also help us understand how they had nothing and created something out of nothing as well. We've got to respect that. As you said, these geniuses on these street corners, but we didn't like their jeans or how they slung down. And now the dudes with the low slung jeans own a whole bunch of stuff. You might not act like the exposure they're behind, which I understand, right? But we legislate against low slung jeans while Tommy Hilfiger wakes away to make millions and billions of dollars off of low slung jeans. What's wrong with that picture as well? But I think you're raising some great points. We got to open it up to the audience for 15 minutes. I think Chairman Brock has spoken and President Jealous has indicated that would be the case. So let's, I does know where my bread is buttered. So let's, Brother Wiggins, all right, we're going to have questions. Let me read some of these questions that we have here. Question from Twitter, from @Peacekeeper. Thank God, Peacekeeper. Is the answer integration or should it be social separation to achieve the justice we deserve in this country? I got a response to that, but I'm gonna be quiet. Let's go down the line. Let's give like 30-second responses.
Well, I mean, we live in a global society, and the world does not operate in separate societies like that. And so I think in order to prepare ourselves for the global economy, in order to prepare ourselves to live in this world, the only way to kind of advance as a people is to be prepared to work with other folks of different races. And so I think in terms of building our own economic base, in terms of avoiding some of the problems with the criminal justice system, it's of course important to look at our own people and work as much as we can within our own communities. But in an overall sense, the only way we can survive is to learn how to survive with each other. And so I think integration is probably the answer.
All right, great. Pastor Dixon.
I agree with that. I think integration is a part of the answer. I don't think it's some people think that integration became our problem. I don't think integration in itself is our problem. I think it's our own misorientation, thinking that because we're integrated now we're equal. We still need each other, and we still have to understand we power. The late Dr. E.V. Hill said to me before he died, he said, my greatest fear is that African American people are no longer a people. He said, we used to be a people, but we don't think like a people anymore. We think like individuals. And so I think it's our me-ism versus our we-ism that's crippling us. And if we were stronger, we could participate in the sea of the global economy. But right now, we don't have any we power, and because we don't have we power, we don't have leverage to negotiate in the broader society.
But that's interesting. That's interesting that Dr. E.V. Hill was a Republican too, wasn't it?
But he was a black man.
That's what I'm saying. I ain't mad. But he was a black man in the Republican Party that didn't have no weism with him. That's what I'm
Right, you're right.
Yes, sir, brother Bone. What do you think, there?
I'm kind of torn in the middle with that. You know what I mean? I think we need to integrate, of course, but economically we might need to separate a little bit because we're such at the bottom of the barrel. So maybe if we pull some of our resources, together. I mean, we spend so much. I don't know the numbers, but we spend more than everybody. Like I think the lady said today, we're 25% of all the Twitter people. You know what I mean? And if we just, I don't know. I just think some of our resources we need to kind of like seek out our people to spend with them. I believe that.
I think there's a big issue in the civil rights community, and our elders put so much into integration, but I don't think that they understood the impact on how much it was going to hurt us economically. I think socially, we've advanced tremendously, but economically it really destroyed us. We had more black millionaires in the 1950s than we have now. And I think that somehow we have to assess and evaluate how we come back around and honestly have a discussion about how integration has hurt us economically. We have an issue within our community that we always think that the white man's ice is colder than the black man's ice. And we always want to do business with others than ourselves, and we have to really, really evaluate that and have a blunt, honest discussion about, coming back around that corner and producing more economics within our community.
Brother Wayne?
I think diversity is key. I think we, as a people, I think we will only know but so much. I think you learn from other cultures, you learn other people's strengths, you learn from other people's religions. I think you got to take its input that will help your output. And I think that you learn from each other, and that's how you take it back to, and then go back and grow your people. But you have to learn from everybody, because the world is not all black. Right. The world that we live in is not. And so we have to live in that world, succeed in that world. And I think the key is through looking at it like this and then going back and focusing on our communities.
Right. Let me just weigh in very, very briefly. I think that, look, obviously Martin Luther King Jr., 10 days before he was murdered, said to a gathering of Jewish rabbis, the Rabbinical Assembly of America, that black people have to be careful lest we integrate ourselves out of power. He said, because what'll end up happening, the little stuff we already got, we're going to lose, and the stuff that we think we're going to get, we're not going to be able to achieve completely. So that's a fair warning. But I think that's different from the kind of romanticization that some black people have of what was going on back in the day. Please. Like, we were all together in the neighborhood and stuff. Yeah, but there were light skin versus dark skin, and there was the people who were making the real dough versus the ones who weren't. And let's not forget that under that so-called segregation, Right, it's different. Self-separation is different. Self-selection that Brother Scott X and everybody else is talking about is different than imposed segregation from outside. Because the schoolroom wasn't equal, and though we had more black millionaires, the distribution of wealth for black people was not as equitable as it should have been, whereas opportunities open up with an integrated society. He made the distinction, I think, Brother Scott X, between social integration and economic integration. Well, we all trying to, get more of that dollar, so to speak. But I think that when that occurs, what we have to do is open up these communities and possibilities. Brother Wayans is talking about that in terms of exploiting markets that we were historically denied access to. The whole point of integration was not to bleach ourselves in an ocean of whiteness, but it was to integrate ourselves into the economic pool that permitted us to be able to derive benefit from that, to reinforce what Pastor Dixon has been speaking about in terms of our values. But the romanticization of what happened under a kind of self-selecting separation and an imposed segregation from without. Brown versus, Board of Education was about destroying the remnants of a two-tiered system that never will favor those who are at the bottom. And then, as they say, think globally and act locally. Maggie Anderson and her family bought black for a year, have a book about it. You can still do that within a broader paradigm of being global. It's just you choose to interact with black barbers, black mathematicians, black thinkers, black schools, right? You can do that, still have excellence, and at the same time understand that your broader value is in a world where you can make a contribution to that world, and that world can understand from you. So I don't think it has to be an either or. I think it can be a both and. Do we have any more questions? We open it. Okay, we'll open it, all right, to the audience. So anybody in the audience have a question that you want to focus? Yes, ma'am. Harlem in New York, 25 years. Mm-hmm.
I live in New York. I'm sorry, I was born in Bed-Stuy, but I live in Harlem for 25 years. So of course, my brothers were out there, hip hop, and I saw a lot of gang violence, right? So now I'm in a place where I've been a youth advisor for 5 years. Mm-hmm. A police officer said to me that he was going to do a rally, and he wants to sort of like connect the churches, the schools, the communities, and things like that, so that we can have a town hall meeting where all the gangs can meet in a neutral territory. And this is so frightening for me because I'm thinking like, I don't know how this is going to happen. So he gave me his email. He said, email me. I really want to put this together. And I know where the gangs are. I know who they are, but we want to bring them together. So he said, we got one place that's neutral. That's 125th. We know that they'll all come to 125th because that's nobody's territory. But how do we begin to work with these political organizations, the policemen, the churches, the schools, to bring everybody together and say, like, we're going to embrace these young people, the gangbangers, the hip-hop crowd, or whatever. It's a very frightening process, so I don't know how to address that. But I'm interested in calling this policeman and saying, I want to be a part of this. But it's a big undertaking.
All right, Brother Bones.
Wow.
And gangbangers, you're saying gangbangers and hip hoppers, not as hip, gangbang, right?
So basically what he's saying is like, we know where the gangs are,
right.
We communicate with them, but we want to bring everybody together. They want to do like, they're going to have events and things like that, but we just need people who have like say a relationship or people who have experience with dealing with people.
That's another consulting job.
I don't know.
I think you could consult. I'm serious. I think you could consult with them on that.
I mean, you gotta have what's the agenda?
Well,
and a lot of times I'm sorry, go
we're
ahead.
going to have services for young people and things like that, jobs.
Job fair.
It's supposed to be a rally to bring people together. Start to,
Okay.
I guess build bridges.
So what can we do? All right.
The question is, how do we do this? It's
How
a
does it
frightening
done?
process for me.
If-
I do want to reach out, but I don't know if I have this place.
My advice to you, I would take it a notch down. I would go grassroots and have some smaller ones before I brought the police in. You know what I mean? Right?
Yeah.
That's what I would do. I would make it real grassroots, and I would do, to have one big meeting, you might have to have 5 to have that one big one. You can't get everybody in the same room who had, and think it's going to turn out good. But if I was you, I'll do it small and tell the police.
I don't know if I'm going to do it. I just thought it was a great idea.
Well, we got to do it. We got to figure out how to do it. We got to figure out how to do it. Yes, sir, Pastor Dixon. Right. Can you consult for them though?
Absolutely.
Get a man a job too. All right. Yes, sir.
I think that I agree with what Bones has said. Start with something smaller, and often we're trying to solve the whole problem in a community, and it's not about solving the whole problem. It's about changing a life. It's about affecting a spot. Our church adopted a 2-mile stretch of apartment complex projects, And so I can walk in any of those right now. But what I started with is Sunday dinner for me was in the projects with the gang members. So we rented an apartment and I had food prepared after church on a Sunday. They didn't come to church. But when I got out of church, I went to the projects, had dinner with the brothers, all right, and sat down eye to eye with them. They got to know me. So you got to establish some credibility, and they got to understand that you really are committed. As you used the word consistent earlier, that you really are committed to this. And man, I've seen some wonderful things take place like that, and often it does not involve the police at all, because the police cause a whole different kind of situation. Yeah. There's a word that we have not used, and we don't use this word much in our language anymore, and that word is love. You know, when people know you love them, once they determine you really love them, then they're open to your wisdom, to your guidance, to your advice. And so if what we got to do is, in small settings, convince these brothers and sisters, these kids, we love you. And this is not about a statistic. It's not about a reputation. It's not about an award I'm trying to get. This is about you. I want you to succeed.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's a great reminder, too. Anybody else over here? Yeah. Great point, bro.
This question is for the attorney. I was wondering if, I wanted to say that racial profiling is starting as early as pre-K. I've seen it as a 21-year-old veteran teacher. Like this past week, there was two boys talking, a little black boy in pre-K and a little white boy in pre-K, and the teacher told the little white boy to be quiet, and then she made the black boy move all the way over by her and berated him even more. And then I looked at his face, and it got all contorted, and he was like trying to process a feeling. And I know children do feel discrimination even at that young age. So I guess my question is, I was wondering about prayer in the schools. They took prayer out of the schools, I guess, as a violation of somebody's rights. So how is it not the opposite for people who want prayer in the schools? Isn't it a violation of our rights to not have prayer if we want it?
That's for the lawyer? Oh, good. Okay. Because I don't want you to accuse me of being the Antichrist. Because I'm against school prayer. Go, yes, sir.
Well, I mean, I think the issue with school prayer is the notion that you're going to try and establish one particular religion in a school, and because kids come from all different walks of life, diverse areas, and different religions, the idea that you establish one prayer, one religion, might offend any other students who are not of that religion. The point is well taken, though, about the school-to-prison pipeline. When you think about the fact that in New York City there are more police officers in schools than there are in the city of Houston as a police force. Yeah. When you think about school discipline and teachers who look at kids and push them out if they're failing, if they cause disruptions, if they do things that would ordinarily have been resolved by sending them to the principal's office, and instead will send them to the police and arrest them and go and lead them basically into the criminal justice system from a very early age. And a lot of the policies around school discipline and ideas about trying to change that framework, change that dynamic, and make sure that school teachers see these kids, as human beings, like all other kids in the school, is something that we need to continue to enforce and address in our communities.
And let me say it very, very quickly. I know we're going to the next question. Can't nobody stop you from praying for real in school, right? Here's what I'm saying. But what do you want? You want to get credit for it? Or you want to do the real prayer, right? So the public thing, even Jesus said going into public and doing all that was against school prayer in that sense, right? I mean, prayer in school can be done when you pray with your kids before they go to school or while they're in school. Because some of the same people who believed in school prayer believed in hanging Negroes too. That's what I'm saying. Martin Luther King Jr. was against school prayer. He said, now, one of the few moments when he said a personal venom allowed entry into his speech, he says, when I saw George Wallace defending it, I knew I had to be against it. So, but I hear you, Doc. But what's interesting is that because he understood, as Mr. Sutherland said, is that the institution of an individual right to pray by giving an institutional acknowledgement to a right way to pray is a problem. That's why the founding fathers, in part, left a place where the state of, the Church of England as a state-recognized society was imposed upon them. Now, you don't get that until somebody made you do a Muslim prayer. Now, if they say, okay, we believe in prayer, it's going to be in the name of the merciful, the beneficent, Allah. But you're a Christian. You're going to get real mad, right, very quickly. So you don't want that kind of thing to come in. But at the same time, in the spirit of Pastor Dixon and in Bone, but the question is, you'd rather pray in school then deal with the people who prey on your kids. And then how do we use and leverage the spiritual authority we have to deal with the problem? They don't need prayer in the sense of, I pray now in church, in public. What they need is the result of prayer for them to be benefited by your action. I think that's a big difference there, as opposed to rituals of prayer, as opposed to righteous response of prayer. I think it makes a heck of a difference.
I got to say 10 seconds on that.
Yes, sir.
If we would start praying with our own kids every morning before they leave home, I mean, it's very serious. And I say it very sincerely, because a lot of people are so religious about that, but their relationship is jacked up. I pray with my kids. I pray with my kids every morning before they leave, and every night, every evening. So they go to school armed for what they're going to deal with in that situation. I think we got to go back to that, and very, very seriously.
Very quick. Very good point. Anybody? Yes, ma'am. Right here? Oh, I'm sorry. Oprah, can you come up here next? Okay, here.
I have a quick question for Bone. You mentioned you're doing good if you do 10 in the prison, but I find in working with youth that have gone to prison and came out and want to get into the educational system, that it's a spirit killer, and that there's something that happens within the prison that really breaks the spirit of the individual. So could you talk to us a little bit about that?
Now, when I said you're doing good if you got 10, because a lot of us get life. Most of our uncles and cousins, everybody, they get life. So if you get 10 years, everybody's like, oh, you did good. That wasn't advocating. Yeah, no, I wasn't advocating.
You were characterizing how they looked at it.
Yeah, but you're right. It does break your spirit. Because when you come home, and especially if I feel sorry for the cats that's coming home now, and where I'm from in LA, because everything has changed. I mean, the black community is not the power source in Los Angeles anymore. Watts, which was Chocolate City, is 75% Latino, 25% black. 75 and 25% black. So when they're coming home, all the resources have gone. Of course, they can't get a job. So it's they're very despair, and the despair turns into anger, and the anger turns into, okay, well, I don't give a F. And then they just start doing the things that they want to do to try to get money for that moment. But when they leave prison, they have all these plans. They write it down what they're going to do. I'm going to get a job, and then I'm going to get the house, and I'm going to take care of my kids. And they can't come down. They can't get one thing crossed off that list when they come home. Like a guy told me, he said, man, I practiced so much to fill out applications when I came home, and when I went to go fill out applications, they weren't taking paper. He had to do them online. He didn't know anything about filling out an application online. So in his mind, it was like, oh, well, forget it then. And he went back to doing his thing. But his whole thing, I'm gonna go put in 100 applications everywhere. He didn't get the chance to do one because he couldn't figure out how to do it online. So it kills their spirit. You're absolutely right. But it's the resources and the coming home to the change, and the despair turns into, I don't care anymore. Right. But you're absolutely right. And that's why we have to have something other than a halfway house that they go to, because it's still the criminal element. It's still prison. It's still the same thing. We got to find a way to intervene as soon as they get here, as soon as they come home, to try to get them into some type of education system, job programming, to teach them how to fill out applications online, because they're teaching them in prison how to do it on paper, and then that's obsolete. So it's a lot of things we can do when they come home. You know what I mean? I'm happy for guys when they come home, but I'm also sad because I know what they're faced with.
Yes, sir. Great point. Great point.
Hello, my name is Daryl Jones. Here in the Sunshine State, we have an ominous cloud. While we come together to talk about Trayvon Martin just 7 years ago, right here in the shadow of this same facility in Panama City Beach, Martin Lee Anderson was killed at the hands of juvenile detention correctional officers. And what we find most amazing here in the state of Florida is that, as tragic as these young people's deaths were, they divide our community and our state and even our nation on racial lines, because everyone doesn't see the travesty and the murder of these young people. What do we do to correct that, where everyone will see the injustice and the death of young people, whether at the hands of vigilantes or police?
Yeah. Well, Mr. Sutherland, you want to respond to that, sir?
In terms of correcting it, where everyone will see the injustices of it, I think part of what if you're talking about the criminal justice system, you're never gonna get justice from that system. It is far too corrupt, it's far too biased. There are far too many problems with it. But I think the tool that it can be used as is one that can shine light on some of the problems that we see in our community, some of the problems that we see with the police, with the prosecutors, with judges. And using the system and holding these things up. I mean, we live in a society where we have all this technology, Twitter, Facebook, all this media, all these access to resources and those types of things. I think the most power we can have is to hold these stories up as examples of the problems that we're having with our society. And in terms of addressing them, I think we have to get more active in terms of our politics. We have to become more organized. We have to work against things like stand your ground laws. We have to work against things like racial profiling. Before 9/11 happened, there was a movement to try and push back against this racial profiling. There was a federal effort, an End Racial Profiling Act. As soon as 9/11 happened, that ended. That effort ended, and all the energy that was around it ended because there was this issue of safety and wanting to go after people in airports like you started with. So I think we need to organize our politics around a lot of these issues and try and confront them in that way and shine a light on them, because I think that's the only way we're going to kind of highlight the injustices.
Ms. Sullivan, when you talk about organizing politics around it, let me just say, for example, local sheriffs are elected. District attorneys are elected. Mayors are elected. All right, so then somebody's supporting those campaigns.
Right.
The way to get laws changed like that is you look at who's supporting the district attorney's campaign. What business owners are supporting those campaigns? All right, so if you're going to support John Doe DA and John Doe judge who supports these laws that are detrimental to our people and they're slanted and biased, then we will not support your product. That means you own this car dealership, we're not buying your cars. You own this store, we're not buying your product. We're not dealing with politics often at that level. Right. That's where our leverage really is. We got the spending power even beyond our voting power. So we've got to connect the politics to those problems and begin to deal with the people who are really behind them, because the person in the office is just the face. Right. It's the person that's funding them that's really perpetuating that wicked system.
An example of that, look at ALEC. The legislative body that they were putting forth model bills and legislation that were getting replicated across the country by conservative lawmakers. Absolutely. So they were outsourcing the work, and then with the raising of that awareness about all these corporations that were fueling the money, yes, the economic boycott, it was not good for them to participate, and as a result of that, they withdrew, which is an excellent point. Absolutely. About what you're making. Yes, back here. Oh, back, yes, okay.
Hi, good afternoon. My organization is Hip Hop for Life. We do a lot around empowerment of young African American males, and we're involved with the Closing the Achievement Gap discussion in New York, where we're looking to really address the educational gap between African American males and males of other races. But I think we're kind of putting the cart before the horse, and been trying to speak up a lot about addressing the self-esteem issues with young African American men, as well as the issue of not having vision and not having their emotional needs met. So while we're talking about this whole education movement, which is still essential, how can we begin to have conversations surrounding addressing the self-esteem issues, emotional needs of young black males, and really fostering vision and a sense of wanting to achieve? And Marlon, specifically, how can the entertainment industry be involved in this conversation?
I think it's a collective kind of discussion. And I think it's one that needs to be had, not just with us, but with, organizations like the NAACP. And I think we should do it, like I think it should always be done in a private place. I don't think having those discussions in public forums is going to forward it. I think we got to keep our locker room closed, and we have to talk about putting together a plan and then going forward and implementing that plan. And I think that's the kind of one of the best ways to do it. But I would keep it in-house and keep it quiet, and then go collectively. All right, here's how we're going to do it. And I think it's talking to the Jay-Z's, talking to the 50 Cents, talking to all those people, and even the comedians. We are a voice. Me and my brothers for years have spoke about racism and all the kinds of things through humor. So for us, it's just, entertainment is a vessel, just in the same way as basketball is a vessel. Entertainment is a vessel, and we all need to come together and figure out a plan and go forward and do it.
Well, and I think that, as a person who taught a class on Jay-Z last semester, we had an enormous amount of both coverage and controversy The coverage, of course, is, we're at a major white institution. We're studying this guy who basically is a high school dropout. The professor has a PhD from Princeton studying a guy who doesn't have a college education, and that professor is calling him like Homer. And people are saying how ridiculous and how crazy. And then the professor is trying to prove that Homer-like qualities exist in a Jay-Z. Well, when you talk about that, the very fact of having a class like that taught at a major institution lends a certain kind of legitimacy and value to voices that have been marginalized and kept out, but whose intelligence is profound. And the emotional, to get directly to your point about emotional intelligence, I mean, isn't that interesting? Because many of us, even in churches, in mosques, in temples, are not taught as men to be emotionally vulnerable, right? We're taught to give forth to a kind of, religious machismo, or at least the assertion of a masculinity that is always strong, and we need that. But when you look at the gangs, as well as the churches, I think men need to have spaces and spots where they're able to communicate their insecurities, their vulnerabilities, and to speak about it. So if you hear a guy like Jay, just when Jay-Z says, all my teachers couldn't reach me and my mama couldn't beat me hard enough to match the pain of my pop not seeing me.
Not leaving me.
So
Yep.
this, with that disdain in my membrane, got on my pimp game, blanked the world, my defense came. There it is right there. The emotional armor that's being generated came out of a sense of vulnerability because of father absence when Brother Wayans was talking about strong black fathers. So when we're transmitting a virus from one generation to another, even if your father is there or not there in terms of what the role of a man is. And if we could talk about helpful models of masculinity and destructive ones, because some at-home fathers transmitted bad values about what black masculinity is about too. We got to acknowledge that too. Some of them were praying for absent fathers. So what's interesting is that when we began to talk about that emotionality, we began to listen to women more. I'm not trying to, right? And the value, let me say this too, not as a program note here, but the value of having Rosalind Brock as the chairman and Benjamin Jealous as the president, CEO, that is a beautiful, mind-changing, paradigmatic shift, because you've got two young people, a female, chocolate charming, and we got a male, Vanilla Vital, and you got that ebony ivory thing going on. Oh, but don't misunderstand how that works with the psyche of black people who never continue to give value to dark-skinned blackness and the assumption about what that means. So when we see Rosalind Brock's fine as she is, stepping up in the place, brilliant as she is, as sharp as she is, with Benjamin Todd Jealous, Rhodes Scholar, when they come together, that begins to shift a paradigm and tells us that black masculinity in concert with female vision can lead the future of black people. I think that becomes a serious thing.
All right. Hello, I'm Michael Johnson, and I'm Michael Johnson. From what I learned about my wrongdoings here, and like what I can help for me to become a better person, help my friends become a better person, and like what I want to just know from y'all is like, what advice do y'all got for me, like to help me go on and make my future better for me and my family?
One is know that you are a leader, and that you are not a follower. And leaders step up and they talk to their peers and they direct them, and leadership doesn't start at a certain age. You can start as soon as you choose to be a leader, as soon as you choose to be a voice, and be that voice that changes your whole generation, and you can do that. I've watched leaders, and don't be a follower. One of my, Tupac Shakur, a great friend of mine, he's gone, but Tupac was a leader that followed, and that was the thing that took him down. That's beautiful, because he really had the power, like I'm telling you, to be that Martin, that Malcolm for this generation. So choose to be a leader and just go do it, man.
How old are you, sir?
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
How old are you?
Oh, I'm 15.
Oh, 15. All right, Pastor, you want to say something?
No, first, let me commend you for being here. And I say that because if you will stay connected to crowds like this, you will be able to go back and impact your generation in a way that others cannot talk. Because your content, your competence determines your conversation. Your conversation determines your company. Your company, are you with me, determines your contribution. So if you can keep building content, which will shape your conversation, then your conversation will determine the company you can get in. Okay? Then you'll find yourself able to speak for your generation and to also interpret for your generation. Because your generation can hear you unlike they can hear us. They see us, they'll profile us when we walk in the room. Right. but when you walk in with a conversation in a language that they can relate to, with a personification that they identify with, then they will follow you. Make up your mind right now that God has you providentially purposed to be in this place to go back and interpret to your generation that those people up here are with us. Right. They are for us. They are our mentors, but we are the warriors. Because ultimately, the change that this nation needs to see amongst our people is in your hands and not ours, young man.
Thank you. Bone, you wanna say something too? Very good, Pastor. Bone, you wanna say something?
I'm gonna keep it simple, and I'm looking at you, and the mere fact you got up and spoke, because a lot of youngsters here are 15. The mere fact you got up, you're a leader. And I want to say what the Reverend said. I think we all in this room should tell you, man, we love you.
Yeah.
When you go back, you got a whole room of people that say, man, they love me, and I think we really should tell him. There you go.
We love you, brother.
We love you, man.
Love you, man.
We love you.
Love you.
Now take that home with you.
Brother Bone. Yeah. Who's your favorite basketball team? Lakers. I love you, man. Lakers? I love you, man. I love you, man. I love you, brother.
I used to. But you can still be a leader.
Yeah. All right.
For real, man. We love you, man.
Beautiful, man.
You do it.
Beautiful, sir. Have a seat up here, Doc. Have a seat up here. All right, and somebody before it's over, direct a question to young brother Johnson before it's over, so he can answer. All right, yes, ma'am, in the back there.
Does it seem to be that there's a generational divide between the males? Now when it comes to issues like profiling, and when you try to explain some of these issues, these really rough things that happen to them, and they become confused and surprised. I'm a mother, and I have 2 boys, and sometimes they just come off like, especially when they're, the beaches and everything, or they're just all mom, you don't know what you're talking about. Right. And they're really confused by what could hurt them or harm them nowadays. And I think a lot of young men are like that. So when they're walking along the streets of Destin or any of these other places, where they don't expect that, they're really shocked and surprised that they're being profiled.
Right. Well,
and I just wanted you to speak to that.
Isn't that interesting that, in one sense, that's what all your hard work is for, right? Is to make them surprised on the one hand, right? That this could even exist. That's a mark. Let's start with the positive first. That's a mark of the level of progress where race consciousness has receded from the light of day. So you could celebrate, it's like, okay, my God. But the problem, of course, is that it's not simply a generational divide, it's a divide in terms of how we have taught and trained and spoken to our children and informed them about that past, because that past is not yet dead. As William Faulkner said, the past ain't even past, because it's still with us. So that when you talk about racial profiling, this is, I think, when we speak about having a black president, a lot of people got it twisted. We got one brother in public housing, and we think all of a sudden that our lives have changed. And it's great public housing. If you're gonna be in the projects, that's the public housing you want to be in, all right? But The tragedy is and even some from our higher, political echelons, African American, suggest that those problems are of the past. Those are the angry black people. No, Trayvon Martin happened recently. Racial profiling continues. So I think it's incumbent upon you as a parent to constantly reinforce to your child the value of our progress, the beauty of our desire to move forward, but also the persistence of the malignancy of a certain kind of cancerous concentration of bigotry, but also practice. That doesn't mean that your child becomes so hyper-racially sensitive that they can't understand the beauty of having white friends or Latino friends and the like, but you teach them to not forget the consequence of their racial identities and the benefits and burdens that attach to that. So I think that in that sense, it's incumbent upon us. We sometimes spoiled our children because we didn't want them to deal with the stuff we dealt with or the burdens we had to deal with and the stuff, as opposed to telling them what we went through so that they could appreciate where they are now. Can you imagine, I'm teaching schools, can you imagine that some of these black students, we don't need no affirmative action. What you talking about? What you think you're here for, Holmes? Well, how do you think you got up in here? What processes do you think? No, because if I'm for affirmative action, white people will think I'm inferior. I got news for you. They thought you was inferior when there was no such thing as affirmative action. And we don't want to say they. I don't want to be careful here and talk about they as white people. Many progressive white brothers and sisters who have fought and paid the price for the expansion of opportunity should be acknowledged in the process. But it's incumbent upon us as older individuals to transmit that learning to our children without transmitting the resentment against, not in the negative sense, but you ought to have a healthy resentment against injustice anywhere. And you begin to teach your children about what that means, and not just in the past, but what persists in the present. Racial profiling goes on right now. School discrimination happens right now. Did you see the report that more young black men are kicked out of school because of they're suspended from school because they're black? That ain't no problem in the 60s. That's happening right now. So when you articulate the persistence of the malignancy of this cancerous concentration, then you begin to explain to them how their lives are implicated in it. And then you don't just say it was us back then. And let me tell you something else finally you got to give up. You got to give up the us versus them, like y'all was so great and they ain't nothing. Right? Back in my day, let me tell you what we did. Let me tell you, show me the picture of you on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Now, that's not the only form of resistance, I get that, but most black people were never involved in the civil rights movement. Most black people never marched. Most black people were never physically involved in the movement for progression that they have now benefited from. So don't act like your kids are somehow from Mars because they don't. Inspire them to do what you may not have done yourself, but also arm them with the knowledge that can prevent them from the kind of crashing sensibility that will occur when they finally find out I am black. People do see me differently, and those are the consequences I have to deal with. So I think that's very important to do.
This is our final.
Yes, this really has been some session. Let's give them another round of applause. I want to thank our chairman, Rosalind Brock, for allowing me to get up to make this announcement. Yes, we are still struggling with the Trayvon Martin issue, the Martin Lee Anderson, all the other issues we have here in Florida with our black boys. But now, thank you. My name is Adora Obi Mweze. I'm president of the Florida State Conference, NAACP, and I'm also a member of the National Board of Directors. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I want you to know that in addition to all we struggle with here in Florida, we want you to know you have another opportunity to join us. On Tuesday, May 29th, we will be in Jacksonville, Florida. There will be a march and rally that we will have around the Marissa Alexander case. Marissa Alexander is a 31-year-old young lady who was sentenced to 20 years 2 weeks ago by the judge in Jacksonville. She shot a gun in her home. She is a victim of domestic violence. We have got to lift the issue up of domestic violence and what is happening to us. All she did was to shoot in the air. She didn't hit him. She should have. She didn't hit anybody. Sorry about that, Pastor. But I'm just saying, because when people shoot and kill folk, they walk. When she shot in the air and shot nobody, she was sentenced to 20 years. It's not right. It's not fair.
Right.
It's a 10 to 20 law here in Florida. It doesn't allow any justice on behalf of our people, and we have got to stop it. The judge had no decision to make because he has none. The law is the law when it comes to us, and when it comes to white folks, there is no law. Join us on Tuesday. Tuesday, May 29th. Tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell anybody to come to Jacksonville. We're going to leave from the old courthouse. They are building an $850 million brand new courthouse in Jacksonville. We're going to be in front of their brand new courthouse, all them multi-millions of dollars. If they think they're going to take that old mess from the old courthouse into the new courthouse, I'm not saying what we're going to do, but pray for us. And join us.
All right. Yeah, several songs come to mind. We're gonna burn. Okay. So Pastor, we're gonna.
What time is that?
Yeah, Brother Wayne.
That happening down in Jacksonville? I want to tweet that to my people out there.
8 o'clock. We're marching 8 o'clock.
Okay, 8 o'clock. All right, thank you.
Please join us.
8 a.m. 8 a.m. 8 a.m. Brother Wayne.
8 a.m.
All right.
Thank you.
So we're gonna go around. Tweet time. How tweet it is. Let's have final remarks. We're going to, take 30 seconds for each of our panelists here to sum up what they think, believe, and think about our situation. All right, Pastor.
Let me just say thank you again to you, Dr. Dyson, and certainly to the chairperson. You've done a great job today. To the other fellow panelists, I've learned so much being here with you and with our chair lady and certainly our president. Thank you so very much. I want to simply say that I think that we've got to recommit collectively and commit to being a collective. Whatever our problems and our challenges are, collectively, we have the resources that it takes to overcome them. Divided, we cannot do anything great. So I would urge us, and then let's go back and reform the stuff that we are a part of. I believe every church should have ministries that deal with these things. I'm not saying stop doing what we're doing. It's one thing to be an usher or a choir member. It's another thing for the men's ministry to be in the streets, in the projects, making the difference. And then finally, be your brother's keeper, not your brother's killer. You can find me at wepowernow.com, wepowernow.com, and we have more information. Thank you so very much. I love every one of you.
Give it up for James Dixon. James Dixon. All right. Mr. Sutherland.
I just want to echo Reverend Dixon's remarks in terms of thanking everyone for having us here. It's been a fantastic session, I think. And I think one of the things that comes across most strong for me is the power of education and the power of mentorship. And these are things that I think we have lost our way in our community in many instances. I think education can overcome a lot of these obstacles and a lot of these barriers, knowing our history, knowing our past, knowing where we're going, and using that individual one-on-one commitment to help each of us rise as a people. I think those are important things. And as long as we work collectively, organize, and educate ourselves, we'll be able to conquer anything as we have in the past.
All right. Thank you. Give it up for Brother Sutherland. Mr. Wayans.
I want to thank you guys for having me. This was something important. I mean, for me, not just, I know I'm an entertainer, comedian, a writer, but, I realize, I'm also a voice. I have 1 million people on Twitter that follow me, and, the more I can influence them in a positive way, as well as through my humor, which I will always do, I will. And there's a responsibility that we all have to, better our race and better our position, because we as a race, we were set back, and we're going to get there. And that's what makes us so great as a people, is we started way back, and look where we come. But there's no telling where we're going to go. And I believe in our generations. Fathers, take care of your children, help and help raise men that raise other men. And it's very important. Don't sleep on
Give it
that.
up for Major Payne. Major Payne. All right.
NAACP.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Brother Payne. Mr. Johnson, what you got to say, bro?
You got a mic?
You got a mic? Give him it.
All right. What I gained from this was I can put in a part and not just be on the sidelines just watching. I could really do something and help my friends, and they could do something, and then they just pass it on. Like when I get home, when I get home, I know the first thing I'm gonna do is just call up everybody, man, I just got in front of everybody, man.
Let's give it up for him, y'all. I know we can do better than that.
Brother John. Good job. Brother, man.
Just in closing, I just want to commend everyone also. I'm really excited about entertainers being committed to the community. Sometimes we bash entertainers about not getting involved, so we need to applaud entertainers for getting involved. So let's give Brother Winans and also Bones a well-deserved round of applause. Really thanks Brother Dyson and all the other panelists for getting involved. But I just think two things just in closing. I think that when we talk about the NAACP and W.E.B. Du Bois, the talented 10th, it's extremely important that the ones that have been given so much, that have been blessed so much, that we get involved in this marketing campaign and stopping the violence throughout the country. That's number one. We need to really give our gifts and our education and our talents to be a part of putting the blueprint together to eradicate the stuff that's going on across the country. Number two, I think that it's extremely important that when we talk about self-esteem, we need to understand that so many of our people are in prison right now. So many of our people are in prison right now. I know in the state of Connecticut, 85% of the prison system is black and Hispanic, and we only represent 20% of the state. So I think that it's extremely important when these individuals come out of prison, we have to figure out how to put them to work. They came up to the north for job opportunities in the industrial industry. In the South, when we came to America, they brought us here to work for free. But at the same time, it's extremely important that we take on the challenge to put our people to work. This is an economic issue. And I think that we need to really analyze this particular situation, really roll up our sleeves and put up a great plan to put our people to work. We have all these training programs, but at the end of the training, there's no job. So we have to be able to put our people back to work and make sure that we are the primary focus of our plan, and that we're not pushing our people to another community, but we galvanize and mobilize for our own community.
That's beautiful. Give it up for Brother Scott X. Brother Bone.
I'm gonna leave you with a street phrase that everybody's even familiar with. Don't get caught slipping. And I'll say this to the parents, because a lot of times in our daily duties we forget about what our kids are doing, and all of a sudden you get that phone call and you never believe that's your kid got locked up for shooting somebody or somebody. So I say to you parents, don't get caught slipping. Be intrusive with your kids. Go through their room, go through their Twitter account, go through their Facebook, go through all of it. Because if you don't, you will get caught slipping and you'll get that phone call that you knew nothing about it. So as parents, since it's about the kids, it's about the children, don't get caught slipping. Be a part of your kids, be intrusive with your kids. That's all I can say.
Give it up for Bone. And he said parents to their kids. Now going to each other's accounts and stuff. I just don't want to start no mess out there. Don't be going into everybody else's accounts. That could get tricky. I want to say that, first of all, I want to thank Chairwoman Rosalind Brock and President and CEO Jealous for the extraordinary leadership and for the continued dynamism of the youth and vitality to bring this organization to its great state it's in today. I would say that, look, obviously we have to balance the things we heard today. We got individual responsibility. We have never denied that as a people, that we have to be individually responsible for what we do. If it wasn't for self-help, we often wouldn't have any help. So we generated structures of accountability within the context of our own struggles to make sure Freedmen's Bureau, voluntary organizations, post-slavery resurrection of our faith. We did that. We built colleges and institutions and banks and millionaires and the like. We have the genius, we have the skill, we have the wherewithal. So we have to continue to hold ourselves accountable. And black on black crime, homicide, the intensity of self-hatred that we project. I hate myself, therefore I hate anybody who looks like me. And the self that I despise, I project onto you, and I begin to do the same criminal acts against you that I do against myself. So in order to stop black on black homicide, we got to resurrect the positive, powerful black self-identity, especially among black men, so that we don't have to create other victims. When you are truly free, you don't have to oppress anybody else. You ain't got to be scared of nobody's sexual orientation. You got to deal with their moral orientation, and you got to talk about who they are as a people. And then I would say we got to, the word that Pastor Dixon talked about that we don't nearly talk enough about is about love. And love means not that sappy, sentimental response to another erotic entanglement. It's about the, although that has its place. But we talk about the uplifting collective enterprise of forging a connection with each other because we love each other. We don't hate nobody else, but we got to learn to love blackness without apology or excuse. Which means that we love everybody in the world. Black people of all ways, the NAACP, the Urban League, all of our best organizations. We invite white brothers and sisters in because we understand if you on the right side of history, you on the right side of black people to forge justice in America. But we've got to learn to unapologetically celebrate our genius and embrace our children and to love our own race. And then finally, what I do individually, I am here to make the life of the mind sexy for young people. I want them to see it's not just a rapper or not just an entertainer or an entrepreneur, but you can be an intellectual, spitting knowledge and venom against white supremacy, black bourgeois capitulation to the worst aspects of our civilization. You can do that as an intellectual, and you can be respectable. You can be a dealer of words, a producer of sentences and pages that will be used as a bulwark against the very forces of oppression that dominate us. That's why I want young people to understand we can make the life of the mind sexy, learning a vital thing, and we can spread that virus. That's what we need to have more of, and that's what I'm here to represent. I thank you for that opportunity. Thank you all. I love you, brother. Thank you so much. All right, baby. Brother Johnson.
You can do better than that. Let's give our panelists a round of applause.
See you next time, brother. All right.
Thank you again for your leadership in joining us. We are not adjourned yet. Again, we want to formally thank our panelists for being here. This is what we're about. We are having an amazing weekend here at Leadership 500. This is about what our theme is, ensuring our legacy, leadership by design. And our specific theme for this year's summit was generations of power. We are building and bridging generations of power through discussion and strategy. And that is what we're here for. If you believe that we have successfully had a panel that discusses and helps us do that, please give them another round of applause. For those of you who are still with us on the World Wide Web, we encourage you to visit us at our websites, www.naacp.org, www.l500.org to hear about our programs. Follow us on Twitter at NAACP and at Leadership 500. Thank you and have a good afternoon.